What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Jesse's Occupational Awareness Show, TDCJ War Stories. Continuing on with our segment here. Today, we're going to talk about probably the worst supervisor I've ever worked for. Not just within TDCJ, but in the military and in civilian world. Now, let's paint a little bit of a picture here. You guys know I like to do that for y'all. I worked with a lot of good supervisors when I was with TDCJ. FTO Lewis, Officer Lewis, my field training officer, shout out to you. Good FTO, good at her job. She got me my assignment to segregation. That was what I wanted. Without knowing what I wanted, she did her job. She took care of me. Shout out to you. Sergeant Briscoe, we had our ups and downs with each other. However, that day we worked together in Seg, when everything was going down to shit, he had my back. He let me warn the building. He worked just as another officer wearing his chevrons. We worked well together. I appreciate that. Everything else, Lieutenant Raymond, man, there have been a lot of people that have watched my show here. They know him by name. They know him by reputation. I don't care what anybody thinks about the man. I like Lieutenant Raymond. I loved working for him. When I came in and he was on shift and he was the supervisor, for TDCJ standards, I knew it was going to be a good day. He took care of his crew. For anybody that disagrees, that's your opinion. This is strictly my opinion. I had a good working relationship with him. We butted heads periodically when we needed to. We always worked through it. And I always got along with the man. He seemed to have respect for me. I had respect for him. Shout out to you. I doubt you'll ever see this channel. If you do, man, reach out to me. Let me know how you're doing. Hope everything's going well for you. With all that said, we're going to get into the worst supervisor I ever worked for. His name was Jones. He was a sergeant. I'm not going to put the words sergeant and his name together. I'm not going to refer to him as a sergeant. His name is simply going to be Jones from there. That was simply the rank that he held at the time that I worked there. Now I'm going to give you guys a little backstory. Y'all know I do this in a lot of videos. It helps paint pictures. I knew Jones outside of TDCJ. Okay? In the mid to late 90s, I lived in Beaumont, Texas. I was in high school. I worked at Pizza Hut. I was a cook. At the time, there was cooks, waitresses, managers, drivers. We didn't really intermingle much with it. Jones was a driver. Jones had a real good personality. I liked his personality. In high school, I was a real quiet, shy kind of kid. Not going to go into it much. I was just quiet and shy. This was pre-military Jesse. Now, I know you guys don't know me outside of these YouTube videos. I'm not the quiet, shy kind of guy. Not at all. Y'all just don't see that on these videos. I've only got what I can work with right here with the equipment that I have. So, Jones was a very upbeat individual. Everybody seemed to like him. He had a good personality. Customers gravitated to him. He would take over the register when he needed to. He would even go out and do some waiter kind of duties when he was in between driving duties. He never helped me out on the freaking make table, but that's whatever. It is what it is. I didn't look at it at the time. I thought he was a cool dude. I wouldn't consider him a friend, but I'd consider him somebody. He was older than me, probably 4 or 5 years older. I looked up to him. As a kid, as a teenager, my upbringing, I was taught to respect my elders, and it didn't really matter if it was 4 or 5 years old. I respected the individuals. That's how I was at the time. And I had a lot of good respect for this guy. I thought he was a cool dude. Now, let's fast forward. Once I had quit from Pizza Hut, graduated high school, gone off to the Marines, life went on from there, never saw the dude again. So from probably, we'll say, 1997 all the way up until 2013, never thought about the guy. I've already finished the academy. I finished the academy. I'm in the process of my OJT process, and I was working in the property room. Don't remember her name. God, that's a recurring theme with me, not remembering people's names. I know their faces. She had been there forever, probably been there over 20 years. She ran the property room there in SEG. One of the OJT processes when you worked in SEG was to not only work the tiers, was to work property inventory. Learn how to take inventory of these guys' stuff and how to get it passed out to them. Jones was a supervisor. Jones was a sergeant. I was working in the property room one day, and he came in there. And I looked at him. Didn't strike me as anything important. Big dude. All right, I'll just go ahead, come on out and say it, as an in-shape military guy. When you look over at somebody who's overweight, out of shape, in uniform, because of our upbringing, because of what we're taught, because of what's ingrained in our head with our training, you look at that individual, man, they look nasty. And that was my first thought to this guy. But I did see the sergeant chevrons, saw them up on the collar and the sleeves. I had respect for that. So the two kind of counterclassed with each other. I was working in the property room, going through the onion sack. Onion sack is this red mesh bag that has all the guys' property inventory in it. Some of the older grocery stores, that's what onions are kept in. Fruit, it's just a name that kind of stuck to it. And this guy says, Carter, Sergeant, hey Carter, you used to work at Pizza Hut? What the fuck? How the fuck you know that, man? Jones, you worked at the Pizza Hut in Beaumont. Holy shit, it was like a reunion. Somebody I hadn't seen in all that time ago from the early 90s. Man, he's here. I'm trying to push to get assigned to SEG. I'm thinking this is the same Jones I knew back from that time. With all the good personality, everybody seemed to like him. I liked him. Whether he liked me or not, I didn't know. Got up, went to shake hands with him. Whoa, man, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, dude wouldn't shake hands with me. I get it. Penitentiary. We're taught to keep our distance, stay away from each other. I figure sergeant teaching a guy on OJT, good habits, let's not shake hands with anybody. Let's not get close. Cool, got it. All right. Hey, man, I've been in the Marines all this time, yada, yada, just hired on, going through OJT. Man, I'm really trying to get pushed into SEG. I was really excited to see this guy. And Jones had his clipboard, and was kind of doing his thing. He'd kind of glance up to me, and after the end, I got done with all my talking, Jones goes, you don't want to be here, and leaves the room. And I'm going, what? You don't, is that a reverse psychology kind of thing? Oh, I get it. Cool. You're doing that thing. You don't want to be here because this is where I want to be. You're trying to talk me out of it. I really need to push to get into this because this is where it needs to be. Unfortunately, I was wrong. So I go through the OJT process, get assigned to SEG, and start working on shift. Day shift, 1-1, going through my thing. Lieutenant Raymond, Sergeant Jones were the supervisors. Man, when I realized that, I had known Lieutenant Raymond just a little bit from working in the OJT process. He was working general population. And I remember being on OJT, patting guys down that were coming out of the chow hall, and Lieutenant Raymond being on the side I was on. The other day that I was on, there was another sergeant. And man, all I had was grief all day. Guys not wanting to get patted down, just talking shit all day. The side I was on with Lieutenant Raymond is still penitentiary, but they seemed a lot more behaved. It seemed like when inmates came out of that chow hall and they saw Lieutenant Raymond out there popping the doors, popping the gate, wasn't nobody talking shit. I'd get my pat downs done. I remember removing a huge sack of peanut butter strapped to one dude's leg. Another guy came out. Man, he had a sack full of burgers. Burger bag was half empty, and as I yanked up on his pants leg, freaking burgers started falling out. We took care of the situation from there. With Lieutenant Raymond, if Lieutenant Raymond wouldn't have been there, the fight would have been on, man. We'd have been going down. But with Lieutenant Raymond there wasn't no fight on. There was just some kind of respect that they had for him. If Jones would have been there, man, I can only imagine what would have happened. So, we'll get into what we're here for today. I'm working SEG, and I'm done with my OJT process, and Jones is the supervisor. I noticed anytime, now we had usually 2 supervisors assigned to SEG, sometimes 3 if it was a newer sergeant. We always had a lieutenant over our shift. There was a sergeant backing him up. Typically, there might be another sergeant. That doesn't actually go together, typically and maybe. God, I'm sorry. There might be a second sergeant, 3 supervisors. Usually it was 2, depending on where they were getting moved around, where they were needed, what they were getting trained for. Anytime Lieutenant Raymond came in the building, it was still SEG. It was still loud. It was still noisy. It was still banging. It got a little bit better. When Jones came in, man, SEG inmates typically had a real scratchy sounding voice. They yelled a lot. A-Pod was about a mile away from F-Pod. 1 pod over to 84 pod was about a mile away from each other. And this guy had to get a message over to this one. He'd yell to the day room. Day room would yell over to 14 area. 14 to D day room. D day room, and it would reach to this guy. This guy would pass it back, and they yelled loud. So when you had individual conversations with these individuals, they had real scratchy voices, raspy from just the communication that they did. Plus, whatever else they were doing in their cells, the pruno that they were doing, whatever kind of smoke they were rolling, whatever kind of dope, drugs that they had mixing up in the cells, these guys did everything. It was hard to catch it, but you could find anything in these cells. And they did it all freaking day long back in there. Whole different story. So, anytime Jones would come in, here we go. Man, Jones, and they always talked about his weight. He was a big guy. Jones, get your fat ass out of here, Jones. Man, I'm not going to say the word that they use for his race. It's the opposite of mine. Man, get your ass out of here. Your fat ass don't even need to be in here. Inmates, for whatever reason, don't know his backstory, they hated this guy. Absolutely hated him. Usually when a supervisor came in SEG while we were working, it was to check over our paperwork, make sure the inmates weren't hanging in their cells, make sure nobody had died in the shower, basically make sure we were doing our jobs. It wasn't so much to back us up if we were getting behind on escorting the inmates around. It was to make sure we were doing our jobs, make sure the paperwork was right, and move on from there. Some supervisors were better at taking care of us. Jones, on the other hand, this motherfucker was the opposite. Man, if some paperwork was off on something, if you didn't have an I dotted, a T crossed, oh, here we go. He's getting ready to file paperwork, get you wrote up. Just wouldn't throw you any kind of a bone to try to take care of you. Now, that's him doing his job. Cool. There's the way things are. There's the way they're supposed to be. We try to get them together. We couldn't always get them to match up. Some supervisors would help us meet either one of them. Jones, on the other hand, the way they are. That was it. That was his lifestyle. Was just not popular amongst anybody. When he would come in the pod would just absolutely erupt. Start yelling, hollering. If an inmate was out on escort, it wasn't uncommon for them to take off running and try to get to him. Now we're trying to chase him down, catch this inmate, or they'd end up with Jones. Jones would hold on to him. We get a hold of him, and it wasn't, hey, thanks for taking care of me. It was, why did you maintain control of this offender? Do you remember your procedures taught defensive tactics? Cool, got it. He would sit there and belittle us in front of the other inmates. The other inmates would then start getting fired up because they knew we had dissension amongst one of our supervisors, and that was one of the worst things you could have. If officers would start bickering back and forth amongst each other in front of the inmates, man, they would just feed on that, and they would do everything that they could to drive us apart. And he did that shit all the time. Never had our backs. Not only did he not have our backs, the inmates didn't freaking like him. It's like nobody sided with this guy. The day that I lost all respect, I never had respect for him, but the day that I lost everything for this guy, once again, I'm sorry, click a dislike if you have to. I don't remember the guy's name. Good officer, good dude. We had an absolute horrible day. Something had happened on night shift. I don't know what. They were short breakfast foods. When we came in the pod, usually they were asleep by that point, and we had to wake them up and check to see who wanted to go to rec and who wanted to go to day room, who wanted to go to shower. They were already awake and banging on doors. And we looked in going, what the fuck is going on in here? Man, it was everything we could do all day long to get these guys to comply. Pull a guy out of a cell, he'd want to take off running. Put the guy in the day room, he'd start climbing the bars. Put a guy in the shower, refuse to come out of the shower. Sit there and start turning on the water. I'm drowning, boss, I'm drowning. Spraying water in his mouth. I'm drowning, boss. Just everything that they could do to make our day just as worse as it could be. And we had done nothing to these guys. We called for supervisor assistance. Didn't get answered. Called for supervisor assistance again. Still didn't get answered. It took multiple times. Finally, the picket boss was able to get in touch with the supervisor, Jones. We had asked permission, locked this pod down. We don't know what's going on. Anytime we move one of these guys, they're off the chain. They're ready to run off the farm. We need to lock this place down. There's something going on. Denied. Keep moving them around. We asked for a second time to lock it down. By the time a guy started banging his head on the bars in the day room, we weren't allowed by policy to pop the day room door, go inside, and stop what was going on. We were supposed to radio, call, and wait for it. This guy wouldn't stop banging his head on the bars. He wouldn't stop trying to hurt himself, and we couldn't get supervisory response. Lieutenant Raymond was busy. I don't know what was going on. Jones, probably taking him forever to get down the hallway. We made the decision. Picket boss popped the door. We went inside. Guy ran at us. We got control of him. I had to file use of force paperwork at the end of that. We got control of the guy, got him restrained, got him put back in his cell. After we got him put back in his cell, we didn't know at this time the picket boss was on the radio, radioing in what was going on. They had called for ICS, Incident Command System, and the assistant warden had heard about this now. Now it's all the way up the chain. We get the guy in the cell, moving around. Assistant warden comes in, pops the door. Nigerian dude. Real hard to understand his accent. I won't go into the specifics of what was said there with him. There were a lot of obscenities said when he came in. He started belittling us, started yelling at us. All right, he leaves. At this point, it's damn near close to the end of shift, and we still have day rooms full. We got inmates in the shower. It was a disaster of a shift. And Jones comes in. I didn't think it could get any louder than it could. And it was like when the band goes into their solo or their chorus and the concert hall erupts. That's what it was. He comes in, comes over to us. What are y'all doing in here, guys? And I looked at him. Sarge, We've been calling you all day on the radio. We can't get any help in here. These guys have been off the chain all day. We tried to lock it down. You wouldn't let it. Why didn't you just go ahead and lock it down? All right. You told me not to do something. Now you're telling me to do something. I know your chicken shit piece of ass is going to write us up for this. Now, at that point, I was mad. Oh, I was fumed. I was hot. And he goes, Carter, I don't think you're going to be right here. I bumped up in the guy's face. Jones, you get the fuck out of my pod right now. And we stared at each other. He turned and left. A couple of inmates that were around the area, they saw what was going on. Some of them had climbed down off the bars in the day room. I'm not saying it got calm in there. It got a little bit quieter because they could hear. They were talking. Jones left. Me and the officer I was working with, we go to the first day room. Guy comes out. Take him to his cell. We go to the shower. Guy comes out. We take him to his cell. By this point, night shift has come on. It's after 6:30. They come in and they're looking around. Hey, Don't start. Don't fucking start with me. It's been a long day. I'm sorry. I know this isn't your problem. You know we don't leave it like this. We were supposed to have all of our inmate movements done by that time, in and out of the cells, from the cells to the day room, back to shower, to back. We were supposed to have all that done. Man, we hadn't even served dinner yet. For those that have worked there, you know how bad that can be. Apologize to day shift. Man, we're sorry. They called for their supervisors. Their 2 sergeants came in. By that point, Lieutenant Raymond was making his rounds. He was doing everything he could to put fires out. Lieutenant Raymond came in. He put out the fire with that, and I felt like shit. I turned over my bean tool. I turned over my cuffs, my key. Night shift was pissed because they didn't move inmates around. That wasn't what they did. Now they had to pull them out of cells and actually put hands on them. I left, and I really didn't think I was going to be able to come back the next day. I thought I was done after that. I was absolutely covered in sweat. Not a dry spot on me. Not because it wasn't air conditioned, but just stress sweat. And that was just one day that was like that. There was a lot that Jones probably could have done. I don't know what the backstory was. I only know from my end. There was a lot that Jones probably could have done to have helped prevented that. Probably by not even being there. Probably would have been better if his ass wouldn't have even been there. But there was a lot that he could have done. And when he came in and tried to turn that around on me, man, you want to talk about a snake in the grass. And that's not the only freaking supervisor that works there in that. I know this one was dark. I hope you guys appreciated it. It took me back to a spot. Man, I really do enjoy telling these stories. They're tough. I love telling these stories. I hope you guys are loving them just as much as I am telling them. Everyone stay safe. Man, stay out of this pandemic. Keep yourselves healthy. Take care of each other. Appreciate every single one of you. Shout out to you.